You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Hi, everybody, it's Peter Schiff, and I just got back yesterday from my time at the New Orleans Investment Conference. And, I expected the mood to be even more jubilant than it was, considering how much the price of gold had risen between the conference a year ago and the conference this past week, and in particular, the gold mining stocks, because it's really a conference dominated by mining stocks. Almost all the exhibitors in the exhibit hall are gold and silver mining companies, with a few others, thrown in there. But the vast majority are mining companies, and pretty much all the attendees invest in gold and silver mining companies, in addition to the physical metal. And, given where we were, I expected even more enthusiasm than I saw. Yeah, I think it was a little bit more upbeat than it was a year ago, when there was a lot more despair and frustration. And of course, a year ago was a great time to be buying gold and silver stocks. But I heard a lot of people talking about taking profits, selling. There was some worried people about the drop. Gold had almost hit 4,400, and they're talking about that big drop, and maybe it's going lower, which of course is what happens in a bull market. You get these violent sell-offs to scare people out. But the bottom line is gold's $4,000 an ounce. In fact, it closed the week almost right at $4,000 an ounce again. Yes, we haven't traded below 3,900. The lowest I've seen gold was in the lower 3,900s, 3,920, 3,930. And it's gotten above 4,000. I think it got to 4,020, 4,030 this week. It's been hanging out at that area. This is very similar to the way gold behaved when it first broke through 3,000. Yes, it wasn't a line in the sand where gold didn't go below 3,000, but it didn't go much below 3,000, and eventually it took off and then went above 4,000. I think we're doing the same thing now. I think we're forming a base right around 4,000, and before you know it, we'll be at 5,000. But meanwhile, a lot of investors aren't going to own gold for that ride because they're getting shaken out now, because they're getting so nervous. The atmosphere and the attitude at the gold conference is the opposite, really, of the Bitcoin conference that I went to in May. Oh, and by the way, I am going to be going to the Bitcoin Binance blockchain conference in Dubai in early December. I'm going there to have my debate with CZ over gold, tokenized gold versus Bitcoin. So that'll be another conference I'm going to. They're expecting 25,000 people. We had, 35,000, or they had 35,000, 40,000 people at the Vegas Bitcoin conference. We didn't even have 1,000 people at the gold conference, despite the fact that that conference has been going on for now 51 years, right? This is the oldest continuous gold conference in the U.S., and it doesn't even attract 1,000 investors. Obviously, this is not the bubble that the media is portraying it to be. The bubble is in crypto, and the air, by the way, is coming out. Bitcoin got back below 100,000 today, and this week, this is the first time since June that we've been below 100,000. Now, there was some buying. I think the entire crypto community is kind of circling the wagons here, trying to defend 100,000. And they were able to pop the market back up to around 104,000. But to me, this is a big bear market. I think once we really break maybe 98,000, 97, get some distance between Bitcoin and 100,000, it's just going to sink like a stone. If the crypto stocks are a leading indicator, they are getting slaughtered. Every stock that is any way related to crypto is way down. I mean, at least 40 or 50%, if not 60 or 70%. Even the leader of the pack, Strategy, hit a 52-week low this morning, and it was down 60% from its 52-week high. Now, it recovered. I think it closed down around 52% from that high. But this is the best stock, right? This is the poster boy for crypto companies, treasury company. And it's been cut in half in what's supposedly, the best environment ever for crypto, with the entire Trump administration behind crypto. In fact, Donald Trump, when he was on 60 Minutes this week, and he basically said that the only thing he cares about is that the United States lead the world in crypto. I mean, that's his main concern, right? According to Donald Trump. Yet despite all that, and he actually bragged on this show, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that he said on the show, but he actually bragged about how right he was on crypto and the crypto industry being so important and being so vital, and that, we must beat China. We can't let China win in crypto. I mean, China doesn't give a damn about winning in crypto, right? That's not even on their bingo card. They'll let us have that market. What do they care? Who wants to lead the world in decentralized Ponzi schemes and pyramids, right? That's an American thing. The Chinese don't want any part of that. They want to invest their money productively. They want to make things that people actually need and that they want. They don't want to waste their resources on crypto. But if you look at these stocks, they are getting decimated, absolutely decimated, and they're a leading indicator of what's going to happen in the tokens themselves. I was watching this interview too on Anthony Pompliano's channel, and I don't remember the name of the company, but what they do is they loan money based on Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a collateral, and so you send your Bitcoin in, and they'll loan you 50% of the value, and they don't have any kind of credit check. They don't care if you have a job or if you have any other assets. The loan is based entirely on the Bitcoin that you put onto their platform. And apparently the reason that people are doing this is they don't want to sell their Bitcoin, right? They say that the number one rule of Bitcoin is never sell. And the reason that that's the rule is because the people who are selling wrote that rule to make sure other people didn't so they could get out. But so you have all these people and they're saying, hey, people have a lot of money in Bitcoin, but they don't want to sell their precious Bitcoin, but they still want to buy things. They want to buy a new car. Maybe they want to take a vacation. They want to buy a house, but they don't want to sell their Bitcoin. So what do? Well, leverage it, borrow against it, put up your Bitcoin and take out a loan. And this is what's going on. This is going to decimate this market. When the market starts to go down, all this Bitcoin that's being held as collateral is going to be liquidated. So instead of people selling their Bitcoin at 100,000 to buy a car, it's going to get sold out from under them at 50,000, probably less. Because even if it's 50% collateral, the lender isn't going to wait until the Bitcoin loses half its value to blow it out, because then they're going to end up losing money. They won't recover enough. But also, what's going to happen to a lot of these people is they're going to owe tax on the Bitcoin, but they would have already borrowed so much money and spent it that even though they're getting taxed at a lower level, let's say they bought their Bitcoin at 10,000 and it gets blown out at 50,000, they still have $40,000 of gains, but they're not getting $40,000 if they've already borrowed $50,000 out and spent it, right? They're only going to get 10, but they're going to probably owe 20 in taxes. I mean, people are going to be completely upside down. It's so reckless and irresponsible. In fact, I think these platforms, these lending platforms, are probably going to end up getting sued by their customers who get blown out of their Bitcoin because of lack of warning. In fact, this whole conversation with Anthony and his guests, now during the conversation, did the risks of this, borrowing against your Bitcoin ever come up? Like, oh yeah, sure thing, right? Just because the assumption is Bitcoin's never going to go down. It's just going to go up forever. So why not borrow against it? But even if you think that Bitcoin is going to go up, it could go down first. No, the craziest thing I think that happened in Bitcoin on the week is what's her name? Kathy Wood from ARK Investments reduced her 2030 price target for Bitcoin from 1.5 million to 1.2 million. Now, first of all, that's not a forecast. That's just a wild guess. How does Kathy Wood have any idea what Bitcoin is going to be worth in 4 or 5 years? She has no clue. So she's just guessing. And so she was guessing 1.5 million, and now she's guessing 1.2 million. But what's even crazier than the guess and the fact that she bothered to reduce it, because, why bother? She said she just found out that people prefer using stable coins to Bitcoin. Like, didn't she know that? Who the hell uses Bitcoin? She's talking about in transactions. Yes, of course they prefer stable coins. They're much easier to use than Bitcoin. So because she just discovered that people aren't really using Bitcoin, she doesn't think it's going to go up quite as much. So it's only going to go up 12x as opposed to 15x. Well, it's actually going down. It's going a lot lower. And all of this leverage that's being built up beneath the market is one of the reasons that this next decline is going to be horrific. And I think, once they throw in the towel around this 100,000 level, it's going to implode. And, all this, of course, is not going to reflect well on the Trump administration, given the fact that they've hitched their wagon to Bitcoin. And so as Bitcoin fails, and the whole Trump family is in this business, it's just going to be another negative on Trump. Meanwhile, if you look at what's been going on in the economy, right, the negatives are really coming to the surface, despite the fact, and again, Donald Trump on this 60 Minutes interview talked about how the U.S. economy is the strongest it's ever been, and it was the weakest it's ever been a year ago when Biden was president, and it went from the worst economy to the best economy, and it's the hottest economy in the world. And everybody agrees that it's the hottest economy in the world. They said the U.S. economy was dead last year, and now it's alive and thriving because Trump is president. Well, if you look at the actual economic data, it belies all of that bragging that's being done by Trump. We got the University of Michigan consumer sentiment numbers that just came out, and not only were they much lower than expected at 50.3, a 6.2% decline from the prior month. And it's about 30% lower than it was a year ago when, I guess when Trump first got elected. Now he's been president for about a year, although he hasn't been president for a year, but it was a year ago that he got elected. But this is the second lowest level for consumer confidence going back to 1978, second lowest. So according to Trump, we've got the greatest economy ever. Yet the people living in that great economy are almost as pessimistic as they've ever been about the economy. And the only time that consumers were this worried about the economy between now and 1978 was in June of 2022. And that was inflation when it had peaked, around 9%. It was at a 40-year high. And that's the last time consumers were as worried. Yet on that 60 Minutes interview, Donald Trump claimed that inflation is gone. He's killed inflation. There's no more inflation. He thinks it's lower than 2%, even though it's higher. So he's already claiming victory on destroying inflation. When one of the reasons that people are so pessimistic is prices are rising. That's one of the main reasons, and their outlook for prices is that they're going to continue to rise. And another reason that consumers are so pessimistic is because the job market is not looking good. In fact, earlier this week, it was just yesterday, or Wednesday, we got the job cut number from Challenger. We would have got the official jobs numbers today, but we didn't get those because of the government shutdown. But we got these Challenger job cut numbers, and these are announced layoffs. And for the month, it was 153,074. That's a 183% increase from September and 175% higher than a year ago, October. These were the most job layoffs that we've had in an October since 2003. And it was led by layoffs in technology-related companies. And that was probably similar back then because we had, the bursting of the dot-com bubble. We had that recession. But it's technology jobs. So these are probably high-paying jobs that are getting axed. And so the worst since 2003, but it's the worst or the highest number of announced layoffs in any month in the fourth quarter, right, which would be October, November, or December. The highest since 2008, which was, of course, the financial crisis. So, I mean, this is telling you if we haven't had companies laying people off at this rate since we were in the middle of the financial crisis, not even the middle, like the depths, the fourth quarter of 2008. I mean, that was it. It started in the summer. So companies were in a lot of trouble. The economy was in bad shape. We were deep in the Great Recession, right? The worst recession since the Depression. And now we have the same amount of layoffs as we did then. Companies are that worried. They're cutting back and they're downsizing. And Trump is out there, going around the world, telling everybody how great our economy is. This is the reality, right? Economic reality flies in the face of this fantasy that, I don't know, maybe Trump believes it, maybe he doesn't. I have no idea. But this is what he's saying. But it's got to be very frustrating to the people to hear all this nonsense and then compare it to their own experience. And one of the places that they're taking out their frustrations, obviously, is the polls. We had some elections this week. I'm going to talk about that. But this is a harbinger of what's going to happen in the midterm elections coming up, in another year. But we got a quick commercial break, so stick around. We're coming right back, and I'll get into the elections. Every business is asking the same question. How do we make AI work for us? The possibilities are endless, and guessing is too risky. But sitting on the sidelines is not an option, because one thing is almost certain: your competitors are already making their move. No more waiting. With NetSuite by Oracle, you can put AI to work today. NetSuite is the #1 AI cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses. It's a unified suite that brings your financials, inventory, commerce, HR, and CRM into a single source of truth. That connected data is what makes your AI smarter. So it doesn't just guess, it knows. NetSuite intelligently automates routine tasks and delivers actionable insights, helping you cut costs and make fast AI-powered decisions with confidence. This isn't another bolted-on tool. It's AI built into the system that runs your business. Whether your company earns millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you stay ahead of the pack. NetSuite is the platform that I would choose, and you should too. Right now, you can get their free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/gold. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/gold. netsuite.com/gold. All right. So the fact that the economy is as bad as it is and getting worse, that is one of the reasons, one of the main reasons, I believe, that we had the election result that we did on Tuesday in New York. Right? There's been a lot of media attention on the mayoral race in New York because we basically have a communist, right, AKA Democratic Socialist, Zoran Mamdani, was leading in the polls. And there was a major press to try to rally up the troops against Mamdani. A lot of money, a lot of people came to the defense of his opponents. Of course, a lot of people wanted Curtis Sliwa to drop out. They saw him as a spoiler. He almost was a spoiler. But actually it turned out that it didn't even matter that he was a spoiler. Because even if Sliwa had dropped out of the race, right, and not even been in the race, and all of his votes went to Cuomo, 100%, Mandami still would have won, right? He still would have had enough votes to go head-to-head with Andrew Cuomo, and he would have won, right? And a lot of people were holding their nose to vote for Cuomo because they didn't want Mandami. But the people who wanted Mandami enthusiastically wanted this guy. I mean, they're so happy that their guy, their champion, is now the mayor of New York. And he played into not only the weakness in the economy, but the general ignorance among young people in particular of economics. And that's because, they've been educated or indoctrinated in government schools. And so they don't know a thing about capitalism and how it works and why it works. And they don't understand anything about socialism and why it doesn't work, right? They don't learn anything in their schools. And so somebody comes out and he promises all this free stuff and the people want it, and he plays into their fears. Your rent is too high, right? Your food bills are too high. So the government's going to solve these problems. And of course, the people think, well, I need the problem solved. Nobody else is solving them. And so this guy's promising that he's going to do it. But of course, the government doesn't solve problems. The government creates problems. The problems that people have now are created by government. They just don't know it. The solution is the free market. If rents are too high, the solution is to allow the free market to bring them down. But the reality is, the main reason that rents are too high is because the government is already interfering in the free market and doing things that are leading to higher rents that the market is not curing. And of course, people would have better incomes and more employment opportunities if the government wasn't erecting barriers in that area as well. And, if you think about the supermarkets, right, because Mandami wants to set up these government-run supermarkets. And I guess the reason is because the owners of the grocery stores and the supermarkets, they're gouging their customers, to make a profit. And so apparently, I guess what Mandami wants to do is take the profit out of groceries. And if we could just take the profit out of groceries, well, then groceries will be affordable because we could get that greedy, business owner, those greedy corporations or whoever supposedly owns the supermarkets, right? If we could just get rid of that profit motive, well, then we could lower prices. Except the margins on groceries are about as low as they could be. 1%, 2%, 3%. I mean, that's it. There is hardly any profit per item. The profit is on volume. People go to the grocery store a lot and they buy a lot of stuff. And so the grocery store owner or the chain or whoever, they make money on volume, not on price. And so how are you gonna cut that out? How is the government going to run a supermarket more efficiently than a private entrepreneur that is motivated by making a profit? And of course, is subject to competition because there's a lot of different grocery stores in New York. And so if one grocery store charges too much, you just go to the other one, right? There's plenty of competition among grocers. So if you really try to gouge your customer, the customers aren't going to be there, right? They're not idiots. They can read the prices on the stuff that's in the grocery stores. But the government's going to take over these grocery stores, and it's going to operate them so inefficiently because governments do everything inefficiently. I mean, do you want to buy your groceries at the post office? Do you think the post office would do a good job, of providing you with food? The reason food is so relatively cheap in America is because the government isn't providing it. Although the government does screw it up in a way with agricultural subsidies. If we got the government out of agriculture, then stuff would be even cheaper, right? They've already screwed it up to a degree, but at least they don't own the supermarkets, right? Well, now in New York, apparently this is what they want to do. But now they're going to be run so inefficiently that they're going to have to charge higher prices to break even. But they're not going to break even. They're going to lose money. So where is the city going to get the money to cover all the losses at these government-run supermarkets, assuming they ever get them off the ground? See, the people who are voting for Mamdani, they don't even know anything about this. They don't consider any of this stuff. They just look at that guy, he smiles, and he looks pretty, and he's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And they all like, hey, they applaud him, and he's criticizing all the rich people. They keep saying, we just got to tax the rich. We just got to tax the rich. The more you tax the rich, the more you hurt the poor. How do you think poor people go from poverty and get out of poverty, right? I mean, the reason people are poor is because they don't have enough stuff, right? They can't buy the things that they need. Well, how do you solve that problem, right? How do you make it so more people can afford more stuff, right? You need a more productive economy. You need to increase the supply of stuff. You need to create abundance out of scarcity so that prices can come down. You need to bring down the cost of living. So if things cost less, then poor people can afford to buy more stuff, and maybe they won't be poor, right? Poverty is really the inability to afford things. But as prices come down, you lift people out of poverty. Well, how do you bring prices down? You need more production. Well, how do you get more production? You need investment. You need capital to get more productivity. And of course, another thing that the poor people could use is a job. Now, where are you going to get a job, right? There's not that many poor people who are hiring, right? Last I, checked, most poor people don't hire anybody, right? In fact, if you got a boss, chances are he's not poor, right? Because if he was poor, he probably wouldn't be hiring you, right? So what the poor people need is they need more stuff at lower prices, and they need somebody to hire them. They need a job, right? Well, it's the wealthy people in society who are going to provide both. It's the wealthy people who invest and provide the capital to increase productivity, and it's the wealthy people that provide employment opportunities. And so if you increase taxes on the rich, what are you going to get? You're going to get less investment, you're going to get lower productivity, and you're going to get fewer job opportunities. How does that help the poor? It doesn't. It actually hurts the poor more than it hurts the rich. Because generally, the rich are still rich, even if you increase their taxes. But what the rich do when you increase their taxes is they invest less and they hire less. So who really gets harmed by taxing the rich? It's the poor, who are counting on the rich to improve their lives, to bring down their cost of living, and to provide them with a job. So all this stuff backfires. We just got to take more money from the risk, as if that is going to solve any of the problems. At one point in America, no one paid any income taxes. The rich or the poor or the middle class, whatever. We had no Social Security taxes. And there was a smaller, divide between the rich and the poor. We did a better job of raising the standard of living of our people when we weren't taking anything from the rich. Think about all the money the government collects in taxes, yet we still have all these problems, right? If we still have poverty, despite the fact that we're already soaking the rich with taxes, how is soaking them some more going to make it any different? You can just look at education, right? We have, lousy government education. We spend more money per person than any country in the world, and we've got about the worst education of any country in the world. Our kids have the lowest test scores. And everyone says, we just need to spend more money on education. Well, why? We're spending so much now, and we're in last place. How is spending more going to change that? You know who wants us to spend more money on education? The education establishment, right? The schools, the bureaucracy at the schools, the teachers, right? They all want us to spend more money on education because they get the money. The truth is, we need to spend less money on education, and we need to spend more time educating and less time, spending. But more spending is never going to do it, and more taxes on the rich is not only not going to help the poor, it's going to hurt the poor, right? Taking money from wealthy people who would otherwise invest it productively and giving it to the government just to dole it out to the people in exchange for their votes. That's how you create poor people. That's how you perpetuate poverty. Now, I suppose the only, good thing that New York has is a lot of this nonsense ain't going to happen because the mayor of New York can't just raise taxes without the approval of the governor of New York. And the governor doesn't want to scare all these rich New Yorkers out of the state, because if they end up moving out of New York City, they may not just head for the suburbs of New York. They may head for California. I'm not California, for Florida or Texas. Maybe some of them will come down here to Puerto Rico. And yes, New York is going to lose those taxpayers, New York City, but so will New York State. And, New York State wants those wealthy people paying the state income tax. So he's going to have a hard time. But there's probably going to be some things that he could get through, some stuff on rent control. I mean, I guess he could do this nonsense with the supermarkets, probably with the subway systems and the buses, right? He wants to make them free. Well, of course, what happens when they're free, right? They're going to be more crowded than they are. People will use the buses, even if they have to go 6 blocks. Why walk? I can get on a bus for free. And which means that, you're never going to get a seat. They're going to be crowded. I mean, it's going to be a disaster when you no longer have, a price. Now, I know a lot of people already just, jump to turnstiles in the subways, but it's going to be even worse, if they're officially going to be for free. But, whenever the government provides something for free, it always costs a lot more one way or the other, especially in a degradation of quality, right? And then a lot of people who would probably otherwise ride the bus, maybe they'll have to take a cab. And now they're going to have to end up spending a lot more money because the free buses are too crowded or are not working anymore, or they're delayed, or who the hell knows what's going to happen. But this could be a disaster. But, these kids, the people who are voting for communists, they don't know anything about. They think they like communism. It doesn't even have like a bad reputation, among the voters. Like, what's wrong with it? What's so bad about it? They have no perspective. They have no education. They don't know anything about, Stalin or what happened in Russia. They don't know anything about Cuba. They don't know anything about, what communism in Vietnam or communism in Korea or Venezuela. They don't know any of this stuff, right? They just think, when they think about it, they just think it's Sweden or Norway as if they're communists, which they're not. In fact, yes, they did experiment with socialism, democratic socialism, and it was an abject failure. That's why they've been moving away from it. But, New York, Manhattan is not going to turn into Stockholm, right? It's going to be Caracas. That's going to be the problem, especially if Mandami is able to get his way. But in a way, it might be worth the sacrifice to have this guy get everything he wants, because it will be such a complete disaster that at least it will be an example for the rest of the country. I mean, you wouldn't think we need more examples of the failures of socialism, communism, but apparently we do, because all the other examples aren't enough. So we need one more. And it's not like we haven't wrecked enough U.S. cities like Baltimore or Detroit, or, that we have a lot of cities that used to be vibrant cities that are, that have been wrecked. But maybe wrecking Manhattan, right? New York City, the financial capital of the world, maybe that'll provide a better example of what not to do. But, I think what probably is going to happen is he's not going to be able to do a lot of the things he wants to do, which is going to help him. But now he's going to blame all that stuff. Like, I would have been able to do all this great stuff if only the governor had allowed me to tax the rich to provide all this stuff. But, I couldn't do it. He tied my hands. And so that's why we're not getting all this good stuff. It's because, this governor is preventing it. I think something similar is going to happen with Donald Trump. The Supreme Court is, I guess, getting close because they had oral arguments. And I said from the beginning that the Trump tariffs are unconstitutional. I mean, it's really a no-brainer. If you know anything about the Constitution, the power to tax is vested with Congress, specifically the House of Representatives, because all revenue bills have to originate there. And tariffs raise revenue. And the Constitution refers to tariffs as taxes. That's what they are. And Trump just can't go around slapping taxes on people because, remember, the whole country, taxation was a big part of the American Revolution, right? We didn't want King George taxing us. Well, we don't want the president taxing us either, right? We wanted the representatives of the people. We wanted our own congressmen from our own districts to tax us. And then if we didn't like the taxes, we could vote them out. Every 2 years, all of the House of Representatives are up for re-election. That's why the Founding Fathers said that's where taxes have to start. If you're going to raise taxes on people, then you're going to go back and explain why you did that to the voters every 2 years. Because remember, the senators were not elected by the people. They were appointed by the state legislatures. So they didn't answer to the people. The president was elected by the Electoral College. He wasn't answering to the people either. The only body that was directly responsible to the people and had to face re-election every 2 years were the House of Representatives. And so our founding fathers said that's where all revenue bills must originate. Originate with the representatives who are most responsive to the people and are going to be held accountable by the very people that they're taxing. So that is the basic concept, right? And the revolution, no taxation without representation. We want our representatives to tax us because if we don't like it, we can vote them out and get some new representatives to replace them, right? But now Trump is just, throwing all these taxes and, he keeps saying, we're getting rich. And he, again, on 60 Minutes, and he's telling everybody, and he's saying that if the Supreme Court strikes down his tariffs, oh my God, it's going to be a Armageddon, he said. We're finished as a nation. It's a disaster. Like the whole thing is riding on these tariffs. He said, if we lose these tariffs, we're going to lose trillions and trillions of dollars. It's not trillions, and we're not losing it. We're collecting it from ourselves. Right? He still thinks we're getting all this money from China and from Europe. We're not getting anything. These deals that he keeps bragging about, this is all a bunch of nonsense, right? He's making all these numbers up and pretending we're getting all of this money. We're not getting anything. Yeah, in some cases, foreign companies may be making investments in the United States, but they're not giving us that money. They own the investments. They may be building a factory here that they will own, and the profits that it generates will be going back to the home country. They're not just writing us a check and walking away. This is all a bunch of nonsense. And of course, I think most of this investment is never going to be made. They're just saying it because that's what Trump wants to hear. And then Trump wants to take it and brag to everybody about these great deals that he's cutting and how much he's making for us. Which is also frustrating because you got the Democrats moving to the left, right? And the Democrats, they also won the governor of New Jersey and Virginia, which I guess not that big a shock, right? Those are blue states, although the current Virginia governor is a Republican, so now that one flipped to a Democrat. But the Democrats are becoming more socialistic, but then so are the Republicans. That is going to be a big problem, right? We're not going in the opposite direction. Trump is also a socialist, right? You can say he's more of a fascist, not the way the left tries to label him. If you go back and go to Mussolini's fascism, he described fascism as corporatism. He said it's when the government and corporations work together, when the government gets very involved in corporate America. What is Trump doing? Right? That's exactly what he's doing now. The government is more involved than ever before with corporate America, taking stakes in corporate America, micromanaging where capital should be flowing, which industry should be favored, which industry should get government money, government protection, right? These are all socialist concepts. It's anti-free market. So we've got both parties moving to the left, moving in the same direction, away from freedom and capitalism and limited government towards more of a totalitarian, centrally planned, socialist type economy. And I think given the choice between, two forms of socialism, the ones that the Democrats are offering are probably going to be more appealing, especially in 2028 when Trump is finished with his term. But in the midterms in 2026, this could be a huge backlash. And the Republicans are going to lose their majority in Congress. Now, by the way, too, they still have the government shutdown, right? It's now a record. I forget what day we're on, but we now broke the record for the longest government shutdown. And I guess that the Democrats have offered an olive branch, which is not really an olive branch. It's kind of, it's a self-serving fake olive branch. But they're saying that, hey, if you just agree to extend the Obamacare cuts for a year, right? The premiums, not the cuts. I mean, if you preserve the subsidies for another year, we'll vote, for the continuing resolution to reopen the government, right? We just, you don't have to make them permanent. Just keep them around for another year. Now, if the Republicans bite on that, they might as well vote to make them permanent because it was already supposed to be temporary. And if they extend them now for a year, well, why wouldn't they do it again a year from now, right? If the Republicans are going to cave now, why won't they cave in a year when it will be even harder to do it, right? Now is the time. It's like now or never. Because the longer you leave a temporary program in place that provides a benefit, the harder it is to actually take that benefit away. And so it'll never be easier to take it away than right now. And so if they buy into this and agree with the Democrats to table it for another year and allow that subsidy to be provided to all these people for yet another year, it'll be that much harder a year from now to take it away. And so if they can't take it away now, there's no way they're taking it away then. See, the Democrats are smart enough to know this, right? All they got to do is preserve it for one more cycle. And of course, a year from now, they're going to have control of the House and the Senate. Now, of course, they might not be able to override a presidential veto. Now, one of the worst things, too, that Trump is trying to do, he's trying to get the Senate to get rid of the filibuster, right, which has been around for about 100 years, I think maybe more than 100 years, and which I think is a pretty good thing, where you need 60 votes to get stuff through, because the most important thing I think that Congress can do is block stuff from happening, right? Because most of the things that government does, and pretty much almost everything government does is bad, right? Almost every law that's passed, almost every regulation does more harm than good. Some of them don't do any good at all. They just do harm, right? I mean, if we had done nothing, right? If you go back to 1789, we got the Constitution. If we had never done anything, if not a single law had been passed, we'd be in so much better shape. I mean, maybe someone's going to say, well, what about slavery? Okay, so, I don't know, forget about slavery. Let's say we got rid of slavery and that's it, right? But none of the other laws that have been enacted, right? If Congress did nothing, if all we did was elect Congress and they just, they just had fun, right? They just, played card games and went out and played golf. If they never did anything, we would be so much better off today. We'd be so much more prosperous. We'd be a lot, freer. You wouldn't even recognize this country. We would be so incredibly wealthy. We would have wealth that nobody could even imagine if government had done absolutely nothing. But instead of doing nothing, they did a lot. They did something. They did more than something. They passed all these laws, and every time the government passes a law, it takes away our freedoms. We have less freedom because now there's a new law telling us that we can't do something, right? People look to government. They say, I want the government to pass a legislation to give me rights. The government doesn't give you rights. It gives you a privilege. But when the government gives somebody a privilege, they have to take away somebody else's right. We already have all of our rights without government, right? The rights come from God. Government is here to secure and protect those rights. We already have them. all government does is infringe on them, takes them away, right? So if government had done nothing, we'd all be better off. So the filibuster helps make sure that the government does less, right? Because the Senate can block stuff from happening, and that's good, right? Because whatever's trying to make its way through the House and the Senate, chances are it's a bad thing. And so we got to stop it. I mean, the only thing that they can really do now that would be good would be to repeal stuff, right? Because if you could repeal some existing regulations and some existing laws, that would probably be a step in the right direction because government is undoing the harm that it's already done. But most of the time, they're just trying to come up with new ways to harm us. And at least the filibuster means that some of this bad stuff isn't going to make it because you're not going to get 60 votes. So right now, the Republicans can't get 60 votes. They can get 50, they can get 51, right? But they can't get 60, and so they can't reopen the government. And so Trump is saying, hey, why don't the Senate get rid of the filibuster? And then we don't need any Democrats, and then we could, just reopen the government on our own. That would be a disaster. I think the Democrats would love that to happen because that would mean that in the future, when they have a bunch of socialist things that they want to pass, a Republican minority won't be able to prevent it from happening. Now, I hear some people say, well, the Democrats are going to get rid of the filibuster as soon as they get the Senate again, which they're going to get, right? And I would say, well, how do you know? They've had the Senate many times, and they haven't done it, right? They haven't been able to do it in the past. I mean, who's to say that you're going to have all the Democrats in the Senate together to get rid of the filibuster? But you don't want the Republicans to do it, right? Because if the Republicans do it now, we're the ones that got rid of it, right? The Democrats didn't even have to do it. We just hand them that gift because they want bigger government by and large, right? You would think. It's the Democrats that want more government, and it's the Republicans that are supposed to stop them. And one of the ways that we can stop them is with the filibuster. But if we surrender that on our own, at least go down fighting, preserve it now. And if the Democrats try to get rid of it, then try to stop them. Try to get some moderate Democrats who also won't like what the Democrats want to do to stand with the Republicans and stop it. You don't want to just throw in the towel. But the fact that Trump is encouraging this, get rid of this filibuster, again, shows me that he doesn't really care about the country. He just cares about his own presidency. He's just trying to make himself look good by getting the government to reopen. And if that means putting us in a worse position in the future because we've given up on the filibuster, now, that would do even more damage. I'd rather have them just agree with the Democrats to extend these Obamacare subsidies than give up the filibuster. But, if they just want to hang tight, right, eventually the Democrats are going to have trap. Who knows? But the other thing I started talking about before I went off on the tangent was scapegoating, because I talked about Mondami is going to basically blame the continued problems in New York on the fact that he couldn't fully implement his communist agenda because he was blocked by the governor. Trump is getting ready to blame the Supreme Court, right? Because he's already saying that if the Supreme Court doesn't uphold his tariffs, we're finished. It's going to be a complete disaster. The economy is going to collapse. It's going to undo all this great stuff he did. And it's, and he even said that there's no way the Supreme Court could do this to America. They couldn't destroy our economy. They couldn't send us into this kind of, downward spiral and basically destroy the whole economy, by setting aside this wonderful thing that I've done, right? This great thing that's making us rich. Our whole economy now is dependent on these Trump tariffs. And if the Supreme Court takes away this great thing, this gift that Trump has given us, then that's it. I mean, we might as well just, pack up our things. The whole country is going to implode, right? Let's just, leave, right? Now, obviously, that's not the case. I mean, we clearly can't be dependent. We've only had these tariffs for a few months, and they're not making us rich. The reason that there's a case before the Supreme Court, the plaintiffs in the case are importers who are paying the tariffs, and they don't want to pay the tariffs. And so they filed a lawsuit saying these taxes that we are paying, we American importers are paying these tariffs, and they're unconstitutional because the House did not enact them. And so we're going to court precisely because we're paying them. If the foreigners were paying them, right, if the foreign countries that these American importers were buying stuff from, if they just said, oh, whoa, Trump just put tariffs on, okay, we'll eat those for you. We're going to lower the prices by the amount of the tariffs. If that was happening, they wouldn't be complaining, right? If the foreign producers were paying these tariffs, there would be no lawsuits by American importers. The reason the American importers are suing is because the foreigners are not paying the tariffs. They're paying the tariffs, and if they pay them, they have to pass them on to their customers. And so they don't want to do that, and so they went to court. And in reality, right, if the tariffs are removed, that's actually a good thing for the Trump administration for two reasons. One, the recession won't be as bad without the tariffs because the tariffs are actually harming the economy. They are not helping it, right? The economy is bad. It would have been bad even without the tariffs, but it's worse with them. So number one, if the court throws out the tariffs, not only are they doing the right thing, but it'll actually be a net positive for the economy, right? But number two, and probably more important for Trump, it provides Trump with another scapegoat. See, right now, his main scapegoat has been the Fed. Too late, pal, right? That idiot, that moron, right? That low IQ person, too late, pal. He's got interest rates too high. He hasn't cut them enough. So he's already set Powell up to be the fall guy, right? We're probably already in recession. Look, we've been in recession for a while, and we'd probably know it maybe if the government wasn't shut down because, we're not getting a lot of data. And my guess is the data we're not getting is very weak. And so Trump is probably happy that the bad news isn't being delivered. But in addition to blaming Powell for the recession, say, look, everything was great, but the damn Fed screwed it all up. If they had only cut rates like I told them, right, because Trump has said he knows more than anybody at the Fed, right? He should really be in charge of the Fed because he's that smart. But unfortunately, we have these low IQ people, and they don't know what they're doing, and they haven't cut rates. So he could blame the Fed that if it wasn't for the Fed, we'd have a great economy. We had a great economy, but the Fed ruined it, right, by not cutting rates. But now he's going to have the Supreme Court as another scapegoat because the Supreme Court strikes down his tariffs. The economy is in recession. Maybe officially the numbers come out, and Trump says the Supreme Court did it. We had this great economy, and the Supreme Court pulled the rug out from under it. They put a knife in it by doing such a reckless and irresponsible thing as repealing, my signature issue, right? They keep saying that, hey, the Supreme Court should give Trump some leeway here because he campaigned on this. This is his signature issue. It doesn't matter. If his signature issue is unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. You got to take the politics out of it. The Supreme Court is not supposed to decide whether or not the tariffs are good or bad. The Supreme Court is supposed to decide, are the tariffs taxes, which they are taxes, and does the president have the power to impose them? And I don't care if you want to claim it's an emergency, right? Because if the president can tax something simply because he claims something is an emergency, what are his emergencies? Fentanyl is an emergency. The trade deficits. We've had trade deficits for 50 years, and now the trade deficit is an emergency, right? Who knows what kind of climate emergency, right? The Democrats, hey, there's a climate emergency. Oh, the president's going to enact a wealth tax or whatever kind of tax because we have a climate emergency. What are we going to do? Well, the president now has broad powers to tax whoever he wants. Doesn't have to go through Congress because we've just declared a climate emergency, right? Who knows, right? Obviously, you can't concoct a fake emergency to try to usurp powers that you don't have, right? I mean, most of the Constitution has already been torn up and thrown out, right? But at least let's abide by this. This is pretty clear and pretty obvious where the taxing authority lies in the Congress, and that a tariff is a tax. And in fact, when Trump is bragging about all the revenue that he's collecting, you collect revenue from taxes, right? The revenue is proof that the tariffs are a tax, right? Maybe if there was no revenue associated with tariffs, you'd have a better argument that they're not a tax. But of course, that's exactly what they are. But it's going to give Trump yet another scapegoat. Anyway, that's it for today's podcast. Again, I think gold is forming a nice base here at 4,000. Silver, it's not, at 50, but it ain't much below it. It's around $48 and change. I mean, it's holding pretty steady, very close to $50. It's not tanking back down to 40. So I think, again, this is another opportunity, just like when silver was around 30, and I was saying 30 is the new 20. 50 is really the new 30. I mean, yeah, you could buy it a little bit below, but for who knows how long. So buy yourself some physical gold and silver at Schiff Gold. The gold mining stocks, again, a lot of these stocks are now in bear markets. It is amazing how far off their highs most of these gold and silver mining stocks are, even though gold is almost 4,000, even though silver is almost 50. These stocks have lost almost all of their gains, since gold was, I think, 3,600, 3,700, since silver was 40. A lot of these stocks are back down to where they were when silver was 40, even though it's 50. And they're just so scared because, well, it was 54, so it's going down. So what? It was 54 for like a day. I mean, if you took that 1 week out, we'd be at the highs, right? I mean, where we are right now is, a month ago, this would be record highs for gold and silver a month ago. Yet there's so much bearishness among investors. And there's not nearly enough bearishness among crypto investors. They're completely complacent. They're happy as clip. They're not worried at all that Bitcoin is going down. They think it's on sale. Hey, it's $100,000. It's on sale. On sale, you're buying nothing and you're paying $100,000. The sale is on gold and silver. And where the sale is whatever you would buy if you just sold your Bitcoin up here. But people don't want to sell it so much that they're going to borrow against it, where they're gonna sell it. It's just going to be sold out from under them at a much lower price than if they just sold it right now. So get your gold and silver, buy these mining stocks. My gold fund, the Euro Pacific Gold Fund, EPGIX is the no load, or go to europac.com. You can set up a separately managed account. All of my strategies, I think, are going to do really, really well in the years ahead. But in particular, this is a time to be adding to the gold stocks. And if you don't have any gold stocks, well, now's the time to incorporate them. You've got a gift horse pullback, a dip, a pretty big one, as an opportunity to buy. And again, don't forget, if you're not currently subscribing to the free newsletter, go to schiffsovereign.com. And in fact, we've got some really good stock recommendations in the mining space as well as part of our strategic assets newsletter, which is a premium service that you could try with an exclusive money-back guarantee. So there's a lot of opportunities right now in the mining space, and they've improved significantly over the last couple of weeks as a lot of fear has gone through the market as a result of a correction that barely reduced the price. We corrected to 4,000 gold, not from 4,000. And silver has corrected, and it's almost 50. So it's a very, very strong market, and the strength is being greatly underappreciated, even by the diehard gold bugs and silver bugs. And so when you have that kind of skepticism among the true believers, just imagine what you got out there among the investing public at large. So anyway, that's it for today, and I'll be back again next week with more podcasts. Bye for now.